service is something that you give yourself to people, if, particularly if they want you, and sometimes if they don't want you, if you feel that you can do something, even if they think that, you're not doing something very useful, and you think you're right there, then you can be of service.
I carved your name.
It's cruel fate that Charles' destiny to become king could only be realised with the death of the Queen. A birthright in waiting for almost a lifetime.
That promise of lifelong service I renew to you all today.
All the things.
An inheritance that will forever be marked by sadness. With the passing of a much-loved monarch, but most wrenchingly, the loss of an adored mother.
Your Majesty, Mummy.
First and foremost, the royal family is a family. How keenly is the loss of the Queen being felt by those who knew her best and loved her most?
I mean, I think the whole nation is shocked and very saddened, and not only just the nation, the whole world. But as a family member, we're all sad. I mean, it's great loss.
Having reached an extraordinary 7th decade as monarch, the Queen's death heralds a huge transition. At 73, Charles ascends the throne as the longest-serving heir apparent in British history. But speculation of who he will be as king has sent Britain into somewhat of a national identity crisis.
I think the overwhelming emotion is certainly grief for the Queen. And I think it's nervous anticipation, perhaps, for King Charles's reign. So what does this mean? What does the future look like? What will the new king's reign look like? What will the new king be like?
Respect and love for Australia and its people, our Australian family, to say that our head of state should be one of us.
Will King Charles, more polarising than popular, be the sovereign to save or destroy the realm? When you said you believed that Charles was a risk to the monarchy, what did you mean by that?
Charles is a controversial man and also a conservative man. His life has been bedogged by the death of Diana and also by his own personality and character. He's an Olympic whinger, a man who constantly complains.
But for his supporters and friends, King Charles is the perfect fit for the times.
I'm very excited about him being king. I want him to be our king of the environment. He has for so long supported all sorts of environmental causes, long before many other people were interested, and now is the most excellent opportunity for him to lead that charge.
At Buckingham Palace, which for 62 years has seen no royal birth, His Royal Highness the baby is born behind these windows.
Queen Elizabeth was just a princess when, on the 14th of November 1948, she and Prince Philip welcomed Charles into the world.
At lovely Windlesham Moor, their recently acquired country home at Sunningdale, Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip spend a happy afternoon with the world's most famous baby.
The world he arrived in wasn't to be sneezed at, a place of extraordinary privilege and attention. But in 3 short years, his mother became queen. With the shock death of her father, King George VI, public service and long separations from her children, became an even bigger part of royal life.
Here's wishing a very important young gentleman many happy returns of the day on his 3rd birthday. It's unfortunate that mother and father are not here to share it with him, but what a party they'll have when they do get back.
It was a childhood Prince Charles would later describe as painful for its loneliness, a pain that only got worse when he was sent to Gordonston, his father's old boarding school in Scotland, which Charles likened to a German concentration camp, calling it Colditz in kilts. Alongside Prince Charles, Johnny Stoneborough was a student there for 4 years. Do you think it was a good fit for Prince Charles?
Many people have said that it was probably not the ideal school to send the young prince to, and I'm inclined to agree with that. And I have quite a strong memory of the prince walking alone. He was not a particularly gregarious person anyway, and I think that he did miss his home, and I think he was homesick, and I think that he was isolated, yeah.
Cementing the isolation, whether it was at mealtime or on the playground, fellow students avoided the prince so as not to themselves become targets of the bullies who clearly relished having a young royal in their sights.
I actually saw one particular incident where he was attacked playing rugby in the scrum, and scrums are rough places anyway, but I could see that they were pulling his ears, for example, and he got punched. But the interesting thing is, and it left a strong impression on me even at the time, was that he was very stoic. He never complained, he didn't whinge, he didn't cry, he didn't do anything that other people might have done in the circumstances. He just got on with it.
Did he fight back?
Absolutely not, no. He was not that sort of person. He was quite a gentle soul. And once you got to know him a little bit better, actually a remarkably nice person. And he certainly didn't fight back.
And at the time, did you see that as a sign of strength or a sign of weakness?
That's a very interesting question. I think that I saw it as a sign of strength, but it also made him vulnerable. And sometimes one wished perhaps that he did retaliate a little more instead of being so stoic, but that's not his nature.
It was in Australia where the teenage prince felt better understood when he was sent to the exclusive Geelong Grammar's Timbertops School for 2 terms. Years later, he fondly recalled his time there as the start of his love affair with Australia.
Part of my own education took place here in Australia. Quite frankly, it was by far the best part. While I was here, I had the pommy bits bashed off me, like chips off an old block.
When he came back after he'd been in Australia, you know, he did remarkably well, and he ended up as head boy of Gordonston, and then he went to Cambridge. So I think in some ways, the Australian experience really helped him, and he found himself in Australia.
It seems Australia helped the young prince find his funny bone and the confidence to share it, even in the classroom.
But I remember one particular incident when the prince enjoyed the Goon Show, and he used to imitate them, and suddenly from the back of the class you would hear this voice saying, "What time is it, Eccles?" And then the reply would be, "I don't know, 8 o'clock." And this would of course make us all laugh, and that was something that he used to do.
Yes, I do believe I've got a bite. I have a bite.
A man of humour and deep introspection.
I think I got quite a large one here. It's very, very large indeed.
A conservationist with extravagant tastes. A humanitarian who could also be a bully. How will the Prince of Contradictions fare as king? For unauthorised biographer Tom Bauer, this ultimate changing of the guard will see a fundamental shift in Charles. For a man who's been waiting in the wings for so long, how easy or difficult do you believe the transition will be for him from prince to king?
His challenge is enormous. I think he will rise to the challenge because he's been preparing for it for 70 years. This is his moment. This is when he can prove himself. This is when there will be the Charles of history which he wants to make sure lasts forever in all our history books. He is determined to succeed. He's had to wait a long time for it. He's not going to blow it now.
Mae'ch ynerchiad wedi fy nghyffwrdd yn ddwys, a gallaf eich sicrhau fy mod
I believe, and that is the motto on the coat of arms of the Prince of Wales. And throughout his whole life, I think when you appreciate that you are going to assume the mantle of kingship, you know, you are slightly different. So he was very conscious of the fact that he was going to be king, and taken his responsibilities very seriously.
In so doing, Ivor believes Charles has created a perception of himself that isn't complete.
And he appears aloof, but as I know him, he certainly isn't. And in a family environment, everybody behaves very differently than your public perception.
What do you think the difference is between the public persona and the private man?
Actually, I suppose warmth. Sometimes on television you can't appreciate the warmth of a person, but he's an exceedingly caring chap.
But Charles has also earned a reputation for being eccentric and out of touch, according to author Tom Bower, who wrote the unauthorised biography, The Rebel Prince.
He's a man who is frightfully self-indulgent. His eating habits, his travel habits, his extravagance, his unwillingness to actually understand that he looks sometimes faintly ridiculous. His commitment to complementary medicine, where he believed that cancer could be cured by coffee enemas, was bizarre.
And an admission he speaks to his much-loved plants had him tagged the Looney Prince, a title Charles skillfully poked fun at.
Only the other day I was inquiring of an entire bed of old-fashioned roses who were forced to listen to my demented ramblings on the meaning of the universe as I sat cross-legged in the lotus position on the gravel paths in front of them.
A more serious passion has been his charity work through the Prince's Trust.
How do you bring hope and some sort of inspiration to people who so often living in the sort of conditions and circumstances where there appears to be no hope at all? Meant to be finished in September.
He's worked tirelessly to create jobs and a future for the underprivileged and unwell, as witnessed by his wife, Camilla.
He feels everything inside, and that's why he gets things done. He's pretty impatient. He wants things done by yesterday, as I think everybody who works for him will tell you, but that's how he gets things done. He's driven by this passion inside him to really help. He really wants to save, he would like to save the world.
But his remarkable efforts have not come without controversy.
Problem with his charities has brought huge controversy because the financing of those charities has always meant raising money from very controversial characters, often criminals, but very rich. and he sold access to himself to get the money to finance his charities. So with everything that Charles has done on the one hand good, there has also been a negative and a bad.
It's, after all, one of my rare opportunities to stir things up, to throw a proverbial royal brick through the inviting plate glass of pompous professional pride.
Charles' willingness to use his position of power to influence and pressure those in the realm of politics has caused great concern, according to royal historian Professor Anna Whitelock.
There is certainly a backstory with Charles where it's been released what were known as the spider letters because of his rather spidery handwriting. He was writing to ministers and advocating for certain causes. And so over the years, there has been some pushback about the fact that he seemed to be intervening in politics, meddling in a way that really he shouldn't. That said, that there isn't a constitutional position as Prince of Wales which formally precluded him from doing that.
Some people have accused you of meddling.
Really? You don't say. But I always wonder what meddling is. I mean, I always thought it was motivating, but I've always been intrigued if it's meddling to worry about the inner cities as I did 40 years ago and what was happening or not happening there, the conditions in which people were living. If that's meddling, I'm very proud of it.
But as monarch, and as modelled by the supremely discreet Queen Elizabeth, the new role, by law, brings new restrictions. Is it a difficult line for him to walk? Because he has been so outspoken about these issues before and he has been political. Do you think that he can keep that in check?
There is, of course, as monarch, as a constitutional monarch, he needs to remain above the fray of politics. And I think over the years, he's always said that, you know, on becoming king, he would very much step into his mother's shoes and absolutely understand the limitations of his position as constitutional monarch.
The idea somehow that I'm going to go on exactly the same way, if I have to succeed, is complete nonsense because the two situations are completely different.
Because, of course, people have expressed worries about whether this involvement will continue in the same way.
No, it won't. I'm not that stupid. I do realize that it is a separate exercise being sovereign. So, of course, you know, I understand entirely how that should operate. An indestructible plastic.
There are many, though, who hope, as king, Charles will continue to address the calamity of climate change, a cause he's been publicly committed to since the 70s.
We must understand the vital importance of all these remarkable natural ecosystems. They are our life support system.
But do you think we've begun to turn the corner now?
Not yet, have we, on climate change? We're running out of time because the necessary action hasn't been taken, has it? That's the problem. And I cannot believe that people can simply pay no attention to science. They accept it in every other aspect of modern existence, the evidence, but apparently not the climate change.
I think the environment does actually give him the space to be much more sort of political with a small p. If he can champion himself as an environmental monarch who can speak out sort of apolitically, as is required of a constitutional monarch, but at the same time speaking into what are becoming increasingly political and global issues, I think he really could find a space and a voice for himself, and in that sense find a kind of new relevance and new purpose for the monarchy.
We must put nature back at the heart of the equation.
Is he going to be perhaps more relevant a monarch than you expected?
Look, I think King Charles will do his best to be unbelievably relevant and a man who sears his name on history.
Coming to the throne so late in life, Charles will have much less time than the Queen to make his mark. But he's not wasted the years leading to this moment.
I, Charles III...
The speeches were written a long time ago. The gestures were planned decades ago and then refined endlessly. So what is happening now is the unfolding of a plan which has been much in gestation, long in thought, deep in thought, and a lot of work has gone into making sure that when Charles is crowned, when Charles speaks, when Charles travels, that everything is synchronized just to make sure that the monarchy is embedded, that his reign is unchallenged, that his position in the Commonwealth and Australia is secure. All that has been thought through very, very carefully. The House of Windsor has survived for 1,000 years, and his job will be to make sure that it survives his lifetime and his children and grandchildren's too.
King Charles may be the man of the moment, but Hollywood's reprising of the past.
So he was constantly embarrassed by this unbelievably beautiful woman.
Is creating a whole new generation of Princess Diana fans, highly critical of the King.
It was very interesting speaking to younger people here, people sort of 18, 19 and in their early 20s who weren't alive when Diana was, but because of the Netflix drama, have a huge amount of sympathy for Diana. I mean, they see her as a sort of martyr, Marilyn Monroe type figure.
An advantage 100%. They get on famously. They have a good laugh together. And so if you've got a happy monarch, then hopefully you have a happy country. So no, it's without doubt is an advantage.
Is the country fond of Camilla?
I mean, she had a tough start. Clearly, the Princess of Wales was exceedingly popular. But, you know, anybody marrying into the royal family historically has had a very rough time. Anybody who really gives it some thought can understand that, you know, being the Prince of Wales or the king as he is now, you know, it's a tough gig. And you do need to have somebody by your side. And she's done a great job. And I think as a result, she has become, you know, much loved. And, you know, people really appreciate that.
He's a very exceptional man. They see him as a very serious person, which he is. But I would like a lot of people to see the lighter side of him.
3 cheers for the royal party!
Outside the family, while public opinion of Camilla and Charles has somewhat softened, not all has been forgiven, despite the years and the hard work.
Camilla has been gradually rehabilitated over the years, and it has been a long, long process. And she was vilified. She was described as the Rottweiler. She was all over the press. She really was, you know, the other woman and talked about in the worst possible way. But she has very much been patient and loyal to Prince Charles and hasn't pushed herself forward, has known her place. But it was very interesting speaking to younger people here, people sort of 18, 19 and in their early 20s who weren't alive when Diana was. But because of the Netflix drama, have a huge amount of sympathy for Diana. I mean, they see her as a sort of martyr, Marilyn Monroe type figure. And when I was speaking to them, they, you know, were really critical of Prince Charles.
It was the wedding the world watched.
Take thee, Philip, Charles, Arthur, George.
And to the world, their union brought magic to the monarchy.
At what stage, going to the cathedral, actually during the service, at what stage did you get the idea that it was becoming an enormous success so that you could enjoy it?
Enjoy something like that? Oh, God. It was terrifying. Such a long walk up that aisle for a start. No, I'm only teasing. Am I?
But when you came out,
we were married, and at that time everybody was saying good luck and I hope everything goes well and how lucky you are to be engaged to such a lovely lady, and my goodness, I was lucky enough to marry her, and we had many messages. It's amazing what ladies do when your back's turned.
2 years into their marriage, and with 9-month-old William in tow, Diana and Charles brought their charm offensive to Australia. It may have been a baptism of fire for Diana, but she quickly made her way into the hearts of royalists to be forever remembered as the People's Princess.
By the time I left Australia, I felt I'd actually been able to achieve something. I was so amazed that I was capable of that.
You got a plastic whale that throws things out the top, little balls.
I just think Australians are marvellous people and very easy to get on with.
I rather like the forthrightness because it means you can be fairly forthright back again. And, you know, that's quite fun.
But it was Charles's lack of forthrightness at home that doomed the marriage even before it began, according to author Tom Bauer.
Well, Charles played the Diana card wrong right from the outset. First of all, he should never have married her because he didn't love her.
Whatever in love means.
Secondly, they were just completely ill-suited. And thirdly, he very quickly showed his envy of her, especially in Australia, during that famous visit in the early 80s.
The children made it clear in the direct way that only children have that it was the princess they wanted on their side of the road.
She was so popular, and he was jealous that she was attracting all the attention and he wasn't.
To the outside world, with their 2 adorable sons, everything seemed picture perfect.
One more kiss, please. Steady.
But behind the scenes, the stage was set for the War of the Waleses, with Diana recording secret briefings for author Andrew Morton on her husband's affair with Camilla.
I was terrified of that, and I said I knew what was going on between you and Charles, and I just want you to know that. And she said to me, very interesting, she said to me, you've got everything you've ever wanted. You've got all the men in the world fall in love with you, and you've got 2 beautiful children. What more would you want? So I said, I want my husband.
Did you try to be faithful and honourable to your wife when you took on the vow of marriage?
Yes, absolutely.
And you were?
Yes. Until it became irretrievably broken down. us both having tried.
It's a proven relationship. It wasn't just a kind of affair that hasn't then translated into a marriage. And I think most people would agree that, they are soulmates. And Camilla was the love of Prince Charles as he was then his life. And I think you would imagine that, times would have moved on, decades have passed since Diana's death. But it does have real potency in the popular discourse. And I think that Charles becoming king is just going to revive that whole discussion, really, and the memory of Diana. Because, of course, there will always be the what-ifs. And the what-ifs, if Diana hadn't died and if Diana had remained married to Charles, we would have Queen Diana now. And you can imagine that the echoes of that will also be around in the next few weeks. And it is amazing that that's still around and pervasive, but it is. And it is not just around the generations that remember Diana, but actually younger generations too.
Even though at the time Diana admitted to her own infidelity, 25 years after her death, her influence in the palace and amongst the people remains strong.
Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall.
So strong, the Queen felt the need to let the public know that on her death, she wished for Camilla, as King Charles' wife, to be given the title of Queen. The carefully planned move was to prevent potential hostility the royal household will continue to monitor.
I think the Buckingham Palace, those around Charles, are going to be watching and observing very carefully how people are reacting to him.
It really will be about the temperature of the public's response, will it?
I think it will largely be about that. I mean, I think there's no doubt that Charles would want to have Camilla officially by his side and have her crowned queen. And it would, in a sense, draw a line under the past. It would also acknowledge Camilla as his wife and for all the work that she's done supporting him and supporting the Queen latterly in the royal family and for the monarchy. But they are not going to want to risk a big public backlash.
While the past may still haunt the present, observers believe King Charles will be focused on the future, doing all he can to rebuff a renewed Republican debate in Australia and throughout the Commonwealth.
Shouldn't our head of state be an Aussie?
You are smart enough.
He was certainly old enough.
We can take it from here.
We can take it from here. Thanks. We can take it from here.
With the passing of the Queen, how healthy do you believe the monarchy is? Can it survive the death of the Queen?
Well, certainly it can, and I'm sure it will. I guess the obvious question for Australia is, should we continue to have the British monarch as our head of state?
Would you accept that the Republicans have a better chance this time around with King Charles?
No, I don't. The Republicans, if they want to try again, well, we say, well, bring it on, try again. We'll keep having the fight, because I just don't think Australians are at that mindset.
Like many around the world, Queensland Liberal National Party MP Jared Blay is mourning the death of Queen Elizabeth.
Well, it's a terrible loss, and Her Majesty epitomised what a monarch in a constitutional monarchy should be and does. She's been an inspiration to many people around the world. She was an inspiration to many women around the world. And so it's a terrible loss, and people will be grieving for a long period of time.
When his party was in office, as a committed monarchist and Attorney General of Queensland at the time, Jared gave back to barristers the title option of Queen's Counsel and renamed courts in Her Majesty's honour. With her death, he leads the Young Monarchists League in a rallying cry against any Republicans emboldened by the Queen's passing.
So I'm looking forward to the future of our constitutional monarchy, and like you, I'll do everything I can to defend it in Queensland and Australia, and young people right around Australia will join us in that fight. And the fight is inevitable. It'll come. When it will come, I have no idea, but we're up to the challenge. And
The Young Monarchists League is a fighting force of close to 50,000 devotees, and it seems they're as passionate about King Charles as they were the Queen.
I was 2 people away from Prince Charles.
We had a fun. And we just stood by as King Charles, or Prince Charles at the time, walked by and shook all of our hands. And I remember the conversation I had with him, and I was just so starstruck. He's like, oh, you know, how do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm okay. Thank you.
What sort of a king do you think Charles will make?
I think he'll grow into the role, and I think he'll be marvellous.
What qualities do you think he has that makes you judge him to be marvellous as king?
I think he's kind. I think he's generous, courteous. I've met him a couple of occasions, and I've seen how he treats people. He'll be very different. He has used his role as formerly Prince of Wales to modernise, and I suspect he'll bring that into his new role as His Majesty the King.
I first came here to Australia 46 years ago.
The issue for Australia is not whether Charles is a good person, because he is. The issue is whether we should have a Englishman or woman, a citizen of another country as our head of state. And vote yes for our republic.
In 1999, former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, then head of the Republican movement, urged Australia to cut ties with the Queen by voting yes in the referendum on a republic.
This is the proudest moment of my life.
It was a campaign to which a slim majority, 55% of Australians, said no.
Here we go.
Would that argument have been easier for you to make at the time of the 1999 referendum if Charles had been on the throne at the time?
Oh, certainly. Well, it would have been a yes. The answer is yes, clearly, because the Queen has had such an extraordinary standing, very long reign, universal respect. Without any doubt. The argument for change was always harder when the Queen was on the throne.
Malcolm Turnbull and Jared Blay might be on the same side of politics today, but 20-odd years ago, they were on opposite sides of the debate, with a 17-year-old Jared handing out vote no cards.
I was in year 11 in 1999, and I was standing out the front of Caloundra State High School, which was my school, and I was handing out vote no to the Republic. And from there, my passion's grown in terms of defending the constitutional monarchy that we have in Australia. I think it sustains us well.
Would you like to be King of Australia?
Well, put it this way, as I say, I've always had a great affection for Australia and for Australians. And all I've ever tried to do, as far as Australia is concerned, is to try and help and encourage.
From his early days at Geelong Grammar's Timber Tops,
Having to go and switch the lights out in the dormitories, and all I got were cries of "Pommy bastard!"
to trips with Mum and Dad, or flying the Royal Flag solo.
There's a guard of honour of 16 lifesavers.
For business or for pleasure, Charles has been a frequent visitor to our shores.
So if there was more of me, I could send one of me to Australia, and another one to wherever else it is, to try and do all the things that I would love to be able to do.
It was 1994 when Ray Martin spoke to Charles about the growing push for Australia to break away from the Crown.
But do you care in that case?
I think it's up to Australians to decide how they want it to be. It's not up to me to decide. I mean, for goodness sake, things have changed. I'm enough of a historian to realise that.
All right.
But let's just avoid the insults and the unnecessary catcalling and all that sort of thing, because, as I've said, all we are interested in is actually helping Australia. We are not trying to make money out of it or sort of hang on to it as if it was some toy.
But British author Tom Bower expects now that Charles is king, his position has dramatically changed, and he will work very hard to retain ties between the two nations.
One shouldn't underestimate how scheming Charles is and how thoughtful he is to maintain his legacy. He will not want to be the king that oversees the breakup of the Commonwealth or the monarchy. He will do his best to maintain the connection with Australia.
Let's talk about Australia's next head of state.
In our current system...
Even before the Queen died, the Australian Republican movement was again publicly agitating for change, advertising a model on how to replace the monarch with our own head of state. Tom Bower believes this has given urgency to the new King's plans.
We can take it from here.
We can take it from here. Thanks.
I anticipate he'll go quickly out to Australia and New Zealand to attempt to seal the bonds again. He is a stout campaigner. William is even better. William and Kate, of course, will be promoted by the palace as the face of the future. That will be key to the campaign in Australia, sending Kate and William there, with their children perhaps, to show that the links are indivisible and can't be broken.
I think now, as Charles ascends the throne, William and Kate are going to be absolutely crucial in supporting him and will be very active working royals.
Royal historian Professor Anna Whitelock believes that while Charles' long-delayed ascension to the throne may not engender great excitement, it's the star power of these younger royals that will keep the Commonwealth intact.
I'm not sure that people are there yet, and I think the apathy might be sufficient to keep Charles on the throne for now, with people believing and holding out perhaps for the future King William and thinking that that might represent something different.
Can you see us going to a referendum?
Not in the short term, no. And I don't think the Republicans will want to rush off to a referendum unless they categorically think they can win it. Because if they do a referendum again and it fails, then hopefully it'll kick into the long grass for many, many, many years and never have the debate again.
Australia will not become a republic on the 1st of January.
Does it frustrate you?
Look, I wouldn't say it frustrates me, it disappoints me, but I did say in 1999 that if we vote no, it'll mean no for a very long time.
In the discharge of these duties, I will be guided by the counsel of their elected parliaments.
But I think the next opportunity is now, because clearly it's a big change of circumstance. You can't get around that.
It is a big change of circumstance, but is it a big issue for most Australians?
Well, again, time will tell. I think this is an enormous watershed. It's a very sad time, but it's also a time when people will give thanks for this extraordinary woman's extraordinary reign and extraordinary service. So, you know, I think there's going to be a period of reflection and focusing on that. And then I think Australians will say, OK, you know, the Queen is dead, long live the King, but do we really want to have a British monarch, a British aristocrat, as our head of state?
As loved as the Queen was, there is no doubt Charles has inherited a monarchy tainted by scandal and discord. While matters abroad may be troubling, it's the issues at home that pose the greater risk.
He will make sure that those who in any way undermine the credibility and honesty and image of the monarchy are cast out. He'll be ruthless about that.
At just 4, Charles was with his mother when, on her coronation, she was first presented to the world as Britain's young queen. All these years later, he was with her again as she made what would be her final appearance on the palace balcony.
regrettably, it comes as a result of the death of your mother, of your parent, which is, not so nice, to say the least.
His is a destiny tinged with sadness, but waiting almost all his life to fulfil it, Charles is perhaps the most prepared monarch Britain has ever had.
And I had the most terrible trouble in keeping, he had...
In Queen Elizabeth, he certainly had an extraordinary guide. The bond between master and apprentice, between mother and son, growing ever stronger as the years mounted.
Your Majesty, Mummy.
This double act comfortably at peace with each other.
And if I may say so, Your Majesty, thank God the weather turned out fine.
But now as king, Charles will be on his own, confronting the controversies that cast a pall over the last years of Queen Elizabeth's reign. The disgraced Prince Andrew, stripped of his titles by the Queen earlier this year, will not be given a second chance by his brother, according to unauthorised biographer and investigative journalist Tom Bower. Along with allegations of sexual abuse which the prince settled for an undisclosed sum, the friendship forged between the prince and the pedophile Jeffrey Epstein while he was alive is judged to be an immovable stain.
Charles made absolutely clear that Andrew is out. Andrew has destroyed his own reputation. Charles has always disliked Andrew's ex-wife, Fergie, the Duchess of York. He hates vulgarity. He hates ostentatiousness.
The decision by Harry and Meghan to separate from the royal family and to continue taking public potshots at the monarchy and Charles is a more painful dilemma for the new king.
I thought my family would help, but every single ask, request, warning, whatever it is, just got met with total silence or total neglect.
The family split is heartbreaking when you're reminded of how close father and son once seemed.
Harry, Harry, Harry!
Mama, you can't touch it!
Can you see a future role for Prince Harry?
I think Prince Harry, like Prince Andrew, has cast himself into the darkness. I think that he is now very happy in California. He has dug his own grave or built his own mountain, whichever way you see it. I think the British, although they loved Harry, and he was by far the most popular of the royal family, have become extraordinarily disillusioned by his criticism, both of the royal family and of his father, of his grandmother, and by his antics.
Oh, really? Please.
Boom. So both Harry and Andrew will be wiped out, airbrushed out of the story of the British royal family.
Do you expect King Charles to be as popular as Queen Elizabeth?
Well, a change is always difficult, isn't it? And nobody likes change. But I suspect King Charles will become exceedingly popular as time goes on.
Lord Ivor Mountbatten, the King's second cousin, believes Charles' eventual popularity will be born out of respect as a man who, even as Prince of Wales, was prepared to make hard decisions that directly affected family, like minimising the size of the monarchy.
The public perception, particularly after the Princess of Wales died, was there were too many hangers-on and that the monarchy really did need to slim down. So all the wider family and cousins, like myself and my brother and all our cousins, were sort of sidelined, which is absolutely the correct thing to do.
Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minutes, segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.